Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to another exciting episode of Tim and Tom's Film Nights. I'm Timothy, and today we have my old pal Thomas join me for some cinematic banter. Now, Thomas, what have you got for us this week?
Oh, Timmy boy, this one is a real doozy. We're talking about the classic British war comedy Hannibal Brooks from 1969, directed by the legendary Michael Winner himself. Now, I must say, this movie really tickled my fancy, but you might not feel the same way as me.
Oh, go on, Thomas. You know I love a good war comedy, especially one set during World War II. Now tell me, who's starring in this gem of a film?
Well, we've got an absolute powerhouse cast here, Timmy. Oliver Reed plays the role of Corporal Brooks, and he's joined by Michael J. Pollard as Private Towson, and the always fantastic Wolfgang Preiss as Colonel von Schlepper Schlechten Schloppen Schloppen Schlappen Schissel.
Cough, excuse me, Tom.
I think you might have misheard the name of the colonel.
Anyway, let's not waste any more time here. Let's dive into this masterpiece and see if it truly deserves all these accolades you've been showering upon it.
Oh, Timothy, I knew you would love it. Now shall we?
Well, Thomas, I must say, I found myself quite bored by the film's comedic antics. The story revolves around two unlikely war heroes, Corporal Brooks and Private Towson, who accidentally stumble upon a secret Nazi rocket-propelled plane.
Ah, Timmy, you always have to find the cloud in every silver lining, don't you? I thought the banter between Oliver Reed and Michael J. Pollard was simply hilarious.
I must admit, there were a few chuckles here and there, but overall the film just failed to hit the mark for me. The supposed comedy felt forced, and I found myself more annoyed by the constant antics of these two buffoonish characters than actually finding them funny.
Oh, come on, Timmy. You're too serious. It's a war comedy, not Hamlet. Besides, who cares about the plot when you have iconic scenes like when Corporal Brooks accidentally launches himself into a tree using the rocket-propelled plane?
I suppose there were some creative moments, but they weren't enough to save this disaster of a movie, in my opinion. The so-called comedy was more like watching two monkeys play with a cannon and expecting it to turn into a Midsummer Night's Dream.
Oh, Timothy, you're just jealous that you weren't born with the gift of the gab like me. Anyway, let's move on to something more interesting. Did you know that all the dinosaur scenes in Jurassic Park were actually shot at a zoo in London?
Speaking of dinosaurs, Tom, I think this discussion has run its course. So tell me, what is it about Hannibal Brooks that you found so hilarious?
Well, Timothy, I found the film's use of humor quite refreshing, actually. It wasn't trying to be overly serious or dramatic like some war films tend to be, and that's what made it stand out for me. Plus, I thought the chemistry between Oliver Reed and Michael J. Pollard was absolutely brilliant. They played off each other so well. Oh, you could really tell they had a blast making this movie.
Tom, I can appreciate your enjoyment of the film, but let's not forget that we're discussing a cinematic masterpiece here, not some amateur hour at the local community center. The fact remains that the humor fell flat for me, and I found myself more annoyed than entertained by their antics.
It was released during a time when war films were all about gritty realism and solemn heroics. Hannibal Brooks dared to be different, to inject some much-needed levity into an otherwise bleak genre. And, let's not forget that it was directed by the legendary Michael Winner.
Tom, I do have a soft spot for Mr. Winner's work, especially his early films like Death Wish and The Sentinel. However, in this particular instance, I believe he may have gone a bit too far with the comedy elements to the detriment of the film's overall quality. But enough about my personal opinions. Let's hear your thoughts on something else, shall we?
Oh, Timothy, you know I can't resist a good trivia question.
How about this one? Did you know that the famous line, "Play it again"?
Sam from Casablanca was never actually said in the film. It was added later by the studio during editing because they thought it would make for a better trailer.
Well, Tom, as much as I appreciate your love of trivia, let's get back to discussing Hannibal Brooks' You seem quite fond of the film. What was it about the movie that really spoke to you? Was it the chemistry between Oliver Reed and Michael J. Pollard? Or perhaps the historical context during its release
Well, Timothy, I think what really drew me into Hannibal Brooks was the script itself. It's a perfect example of British comedy writing at its finest. The dry wit and banter between Oliver Reed and Michael J. Pollard were simply hilarious. And who could forget the iconic scene where Corporal Brooks accidentally launches himself into a tree using the rocket-propelled plane? That was pure comedic gold, if you ask me. But, it wasn't only the script that impressed me. I thought director Michael Winner did an excellent job of balancing the humor and action sequences. The film had me laughing out loud one moment and on the edge of my seat the next. And let's not forget about the historical context in which this film was released, during a time when war films were often very somber and serious. Hannibal Brooks dared to be different, and I, for one, applaud their boldness.
Thomas, you always have a way of seeing the silver lining in even the darkest of films, don't you? I mean, don't get me wrong, there were some moments that did make me chuckle here and there, but overall, I found the humor to be forced and not at all fitting for a film set during World War II now. Let's talk about the direction for a moment. While I won't deny that Michael Winner is a talented director, he seemed to have prioritized the comedic elements over the historical accuracy of the time period. For example, the use of color in some scenes was simply distracting, given that World War II was known for its drab colors and grimy settings. And don't even get me started on the absurdity of the rocket-propelled plane scene. It's not like Nazi Germany had developed such advanced technology at that point in history. But enough of my ranting, Thomas. Let's hear your thoughts on the acting performances in Hannibal Brooks. Did you find Oliver Reed and Michael J. Pollard to be convincing as their respective characters?
Timothy, you know I can't resist a good argument. But since we're talking about the acting performances in Hannibal Brooks, I must say that both Oliver Reed and Michael J. Pollard did an exceptional job. They had amazing chemistry together, which was crucial for the film to work as well as it did. Oliver Reed brought a perfect balance of stoicism and vulnerability to his role as Corporal Brooks, while Michael J. Pollard's character, Private Towson, was an absolute comedic genius. Their back-and-forth banter was some of the funniest dialogue I've ever heard in a war film. And let's not forget about Wolfgang Preiss as Colonel von Schlepper Schlechten Schloppen Schlappenschissel. He brought a much-needed touch of, seriousness to the otherwise chaotic plot. So, Timothy, do you want to change the subject now? We could discuss the breathtaking cinematography, or perhaps the authenticity of, the uniforms worn by the actors?
I must admit, Thomas, you do have a point about the chemistry between Oliver Reed and Michael J. Pollard. Their banter and bickering did help carry the film at times when the jokes might have otherwise fallen flat for me. However, I still stand by my initial assessment that the movie's attempt at mixing comedy with warfare simply doesn't quite work for me. It's like trying to make a cheeseburger without any cheese. It's not exactly a delicious dish. Now, is it? As for the historical accuracy we discussed earlier, I think we can both agree that Michael Winner did take some creative liberties with the time period, especially when it came to the rocket-propelled plane scene. While it was admittedly entertaining to watch Corporal Brooks accidentally launch himself into a tree like a human missile, I do wish they had kept the story grounded in reality a bit more. After all, we're talking about actual events that occurred during World War II. The least we can do is pay homage to the brave men and women who truly risked their lives during those tumultuous times. So, Thomas, tell me, have you ever seen any other films or TV shows that were influenced by Hannibal Brooks in terms of mixing comedy and warfare? I'm thinking specifically about shows like MASH or movies like The Great Escape. Do you think they managed to strike the right balance between humor and historical accuracy? Or were they also guilty of crossing the line, so to speak?
Timothy, you've hit on a couple of classic examples. Both MASH and The Great Escape were indeed influenced by films like Hannibal Brooks, but they managed to strike a better balance between comedy and the somberness of war. In fact, MASH is often praised for its realistic portrayal of life as a doctor in a mobile surgical unit during the Korean War. It's not a laugh, a minute comedy show, but it does find moments of levity in even the darkest of situations. As for The Great Escape, while it has its share of humor, director John Sturges and his team made sure to maintain a certain level of authenticity when depicting the prisoners' daring escape attempts from the infamous POW camp known as the Escaping Club. In more recent times, we have shows like Catch 22-inch, which, while not explicitly based on Hannibal Brooks, shares similar themes of absurdity and humor within the context of war. The 2019 miniseries adaptation of Joseph Heller's classic novel, starring a powerhouse cast including George Clooney and Christopher Abbott, delves into the lives of us airmen stationed on the Italian island of Corsica during World War II. Although it received mixed reviews from critics, many praised its ability to balance dark humor and grim reality, much like Hannibal Brooks did in its time. So, Timothy, do you have any other examples you'd like to add? Or should we maybe move on to our next topic, which I believe was supposed to be about, the impact of dinosaurs on space exploration?
Well, Tom, I'm afraid we've reached the end of our discussion about Hannibal Brooks for today. While our opinions on the film still remain quite divided, I think we can both agree that it was an important milestone in the history of British comedy and war films alike. It paved the way for future films like The Great Escape and TV shows like Catch 22-inch to delicately balance humor and realism within the context of war. As we close out this episode, I would like to remind our viewers that if you enjoyed our insights today, please consider subscribing to our channel, leaving a comment, and sharing this video with your friends and family members who are also fans of British comedy and World War II history. And finally, remember to always keep an open mind, even when discussing topics like dinosaurs' impact on space exploration. Until next time, farewell and happy viewing